Hey, good evening and welcome to Yeshiva YouTube, special Motzei Shabbos edition of Iyun. Shabbos Pereches. I'm going to really be dealing with both Mishnayos tonight, Mishnayos Beis and Gimel. The question arises, it says in Mishnah Beis that Kesher Muchsin, right, Niyar, if you take out a piece of paper, A4, paper that you put in a printer or something like that, so a very small piece of paper, you can be chayav for taking out, even if it's, your ripped piece of paper. If you can put a check mark over there because you want to approve something, get verified by the IRS, they put a check mark. That's what I think it is. And then the Mishnah continues, Amoti kesher muksin chayav. If you take out something with a kesher muksin on it, with a check mark on it, right? You take a piece of paper, even there's no kesher muksin, there's no check mark on it. If there's space to write a check mark, you're chayav for taking out the blank paper. And then it says if you took out a piece of paper with a check mark, you're chayav. So the question is, what's a chiddush? What are we talking about? A regular piece of paper? We just said you don't have to actually write a check mark on it. So tell me, if I wrote the check mark on it, you're going to be chayav also. Why not? That's the whole purpose, right? Because it's legitimately could be used to write a check mark on it. So because I wrote a check mark on it, of course you're going to be chayav. What's a chiddush? So all the Rishonim ask this question. Tosfos here and it's very Yisrael. The answer. The chiddush is we're talking about cloth over here. Before we're talking about regular paper. The chiddush over here is cloth, which is parchment, which usually is reserved. It's expensive. It's from the hide of an animal. It has to be worked. It has to be made in a certain way. Normally, so that's what the chiddush of the Mishnah is. That if you have a piece of cloth, which is not usually used for a check mark, but you wrote a check mark on your chayav, even though it's a very small amount. Now, the question is from the Mishnah Gimel, where Mishnah Gimel says, cloth, it talks about cloth. They lift up a lot, parshat tanish with tefillin, shishma Yisrael. You have to, when you take out cloth, right, blank cloth, right, not reading, it has to be big enough that you can fit Shema Yisrael. So, Shema Yisrael is a lot bigger than a check mark. So, how could it be that in Mishnah Beis we said a piece of cloth with a check mark? We're saying, in Mishnah Gimel, that has to be big enough to write the smallest parsha of tefillin, Shema Yisrael. So the answer is as follows, I believe, is that if you listen to my Iyun with Ben Sion, Shir, Mesachas Nedarim, there's a big difference in L'chadchila and B'diavad. We talk about Breira, L'chadchila and B'diavad. Here also, right, Hotzah is practicality. I'm taking it out. Now, L'chadchila, right, if you have a piece of cloth, no one's going to write check mark on it because it's a valuable cloth. You need it to write Sifrei Torah, Mezuzos, tefillin on it, parsha of tefillin. That's what you use it for. So if you have a blank piece, legitimately, we're not going to say people are going to write a check mark on it. So a blank piece, you're not chayav for the size of a check mark. It has to be big enough to be used for what it's normally used for, which is to write parsha of tefillin, the smallest parsha of tefillin. However, b'diavad, if you wrote something on it, it becomes valuable. It's valuable to someone to have a check mark by the IRS to say that you paid your taxes, or whatever stamp that they give, a small stamp, a small check mark, a small receipt. I'm still undecided exactly what exactly Kesher Muksin is, but it's some sort of approval that IRS have shown that you've paid your taxes. So, yes, most people wouldn't use a piece of cloth, and therefore, like we mentioned before, that if it's not something most people use it for, it's not the shear for Hotzah. However, the Eved, people would find it valuable, even though you use an expensive thing to write it on cloth. Nonetheless, if you wrote it on something, it's proof that you paid your taxes. So b'diavad, if it was written a check mark Muksin and it's a small piece, even though it's not big enough to write Shema Yisrael, it's used already, but it's used for a valuable purpose. So you want to keep it for that purpose. Therefore, you be chayav for taking it out, even though it's a smaller share. Even though if it were blank, it has to be a bigger share. Hope you enjoyed tonight's share. See you in the next one.